So just as you're listening to this, we are recording this before all of the abundance of West Street news arrives. So I'm sure you'll hear it throughout the show. But what you hear at the start, maybe we have a new Prime Minister, who knows? But we are reacting to it as we go, which, as everyone says for a podcast, you should never do. It's about evergreen podcasting. Don't react to breaking news. It makes you look stupid. But we have done, and so we hope you enjoy the listen.
We are not afraid of looking stupid.
I mean, that never a truer word has been said. Show me the episode. Welcome to Crash, the technology podcast about everything else. Today, that means industrial scale copyright infringement accusations, another EU backtrack, and the AI code of practice that's been years in the making and isn't really a code of practice at all. I'm Alex Hudson.
And I'm Chris Stokely-Walker. Isn't that typical of the EU? He says, in his most and only Brexity way. That is my only gammon-like opinion, I think, to be honest, Alex, that sometimes the EU needs to get out from beneath their own feet on this sort of stuff.
I'm sure we can find you more gammon-y opinions. Anytime I write gammon, I get the most complaints about exactly how dare you use that slur. It is a pointed and sexist slur that I'm using if I call anyone a gammon, or if I even use gammon in polite parlance.
Why is it sexist?
Well, it is nearly universally against men.
I mean, I don't want to start naming names because then we have to ask for right to reply, but I can think of at least 4 women who I could call gammony right now.
But aren't they Karens? Isn't that the gender split? You're either a gammon or a Karen.
No. A Karen is not necessarily, for me, a Karen is not a political division thing. It's not on that axis. Karen is a state of mind.
But is gammon a political viewpoint?
Yeah, I think so.
We're not going to talk too much about politics today because the King's speech, we're recording this just before the King's speech, and we're recording this just after West Streeting has left Downing Street after about 30 seconds. So by the time this comes out, we could have a whole new government. Who knows what could have happened? Or, as we predicted was it the end of the start of the year, that there'll be a potential leadership challenge and it probably will come to nothing. So I'm going to take that in the wins column for my particular prediction, assuming that West Streeting doesn't suddenly jump out today, and then I'll look really stupid when this comes out tomorrow.
I am impressed though. West Streeting is a man after my own heart. He does a quick meeting, which is very, very good. He's even quicker than I am. He's in and out in 10 minutes. I usually schedule 15.
In this environment, saying that West Streeting is a man after your own heart is a brave thing to say.
Well, I would go and see The Devil Wears Prada 2 with him over a weekend. Did you not see this? Did you miss this?
If you could make that happen. I haven't seen that at all.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so this is fantastic. So we do have to talk a little bit about politics, and apologies. So one of the reasons why, Peter Kyle did, I don't know whether it was one of those really extraordinary interviews where just like was at pains to explain that Wes Streeting could not possibly be launching a coup against Keir Starmer because he had gone and seen The Devil Wears Prada 2 at the cinema with Wes Streeting at the weekend, and so therefore he was right as rain and completely on board with the Labour government message.
I don't understand why. I understand that all politics is doomed. Everything is about messaging, and all of this sort of stuff around the last. Well, it probably isn't the last dying days of the Labour government, but it is unlikely now that Starmer faces the next election. But the fact that we've devolved it into who did and who did not see Devil's Wear Prada 2, which apparently is a great film. I've not seen it. Have you seen it? Or are you waiting for West Streeting's invite?
I'm waiting for the invite, although I do wonder. I wonder whether they shared some nachos or whether they shared some popcorn.
Nachos at the cinema. No, the gentrification of cinema where you can order pizza into your seat is both a great thing and a terrible thing. Anyway, the 2 things I wanted to talk about is, you've been, I think the best thing of yours, or the most interesting thing of yours I've read this week, is about how Japan obsessed LLMs are, and I didn't know, I hadn't thought about that before, and I haven't really encountered it. But you're saying that suddenly, if you ask them about anything, suddenly they'll bring up either Japan or US, but apparently Japan is the most prevalent. What?
Yeah, this is just such a weird thing, and I guess it's like a consequence, I suppose, of the way in which AI systems work, which is a massive reflection of the training data on which it's based that bakes in cultural biases as well. So yeah, there's this preprint that got published recently, which basically bombarded very popular AI systems with 30 odd thousand open-ended questions and asked them to pontificate effectively on the answers of it. Turns out that actually, it kept pivoting back to Japan. So we talk about like how amazing anime is and things like that, even when there's no actual link to the country at all. And this bore out through lots of different languages. So, you could ask it in Swahili versus English, and it would still talk about Japan. So it's, AI systems are properly obsessed with Japan. It seems maybe they've seen the weak yen and the opportunity to get over there pretty quickly, and said, you know what, I'll have a bit of that as well.
Or maybe just those who have a particular penchant for Japanese culture are the very online sort, without
Yeah.
wishing to cast any aspersions at all. Or, anyway, I think my week has just been very, very crashed. So I spent yesterday with a friend of Crashed, Polita Papel. She was giving a talk at Soho House. That's how gentrified my world has become. I'm not a member of Soho House, to be clear. But it was a talk about sort of sex culture and what that means in practice, and the censorship thing that we talked about on Crashed. It's with MJ Fox, who's a sort of a creator in that space and an entrepreneur in that space. And then today I'm going for coffee with other friend of the show, Taylor Lorenz, who's in town from the US, which that'll be jolly.
Just dropping names left, right, and centre here. Not a bad life to lead. What was the Soho House response to Paulita's debate?
I think the Soho House rules means it's all very Chatham House, isn't it? But it was a very, very friendly room of people. Good. To the point where the Q&A ended up involving 5 or 6 different guests, all of whom have direct experience in this space, and a couple of writers very familiar with the matter were asking other questions. And there was not even a parliamentary aide in that room. It was a very strange space, but it was interesting. But I think it's a case of there is a big question around the point of preaching to the converted and what actually the point of those talks are, and how in a digital world, in a Web3 world, you can meaningfully affect change when the algorithm means that you see more stuff that you agree with, and the dividing of the sort of the forums and the rooms around it means that you see things that you agree with, or you talk with people that you already agree with, and having that diversification of views or convincing people who don't already agree with you is this fascinating bit of, I'm trying to do a lot of work on this anyway, and this really highlighted just actually, if you're in a room where everyone already agrees with you, what is the purpose of widening that discussion if everyone already thinks the same thing? And how do you affect meaningful change? It's a difficult place when people are only listening to things that they've already heard.
Yeah, I often think that is a big issue in terms of echo chambers don't just exist online, they exist in the offline world as well. And so while it's great that you can have a welcoming room and a positive room and a room that kind of ends up in agreement, I think part of the problem is that sometimes it's difficult to stress test the arguments in opposition to what you're aiming for without that sort of slightly more rounded view, which I guess is what we're encountering at the minute with the Labour Party as well. Not to bring it back to politics, but I notice Jess Phillips's resignation letter talking about the idea of we're unafraid to ask. We're so something like we're so afraid to have arguments or discussions that we don't ask the questions anymore, and so that's always a bit of a challenge.
I think that is a fundamental underpinning of where progressive politics is at the moment, around this obsession with focus groups and what the Labour membership thinks and what the voter thinks is a set piece document. And we are going to have a huge episode about that when I'm allowed to talk about it. But that is the wrong question. And it's, if we've had 4 prime ministers in 4 years, why? That's a really interesting bit that does really blur into tech a little bit, or at least in the communication methods that digital has allowed. And separately, why is the progressive piece of the political pie still fighting reform and others on policy rather than on rhetoric? And that's a really interesting question to which there is no answer, but also what needs to change for that inbuilt, really heavy muscle memory of progressive politics? What needs to change for that to happen? Anyway,
should we get on with our first story?
We should probably move to stories that aren't just pontificating over things that will probably change by the time this comes out. So, Starmer, be in government at least by Thursday morning, so at least this podcast doesn't age so aggressively quickly. So on to our main story. Shein, the fast fashion platform, accused competitor Temu of industrial-scale copyright infringement in a High Court trial in London that started earlier this week. So Temu said in response that Shein is using this case to stifle competition. Shein says Temu advertised copies of Shein's own branded clothing using thousands of copied photos. According to Shein's lawyer, this was an attempt to steal a march on an existing participant in the market, and Temu has sought to obtain an unfair advantage. That's all according to Reuters reporting. So Temu denies the allegations and the case is ongoing. It's a significant but small piece in the global battle of the beer moths and what role tech plays in fast fashion, in fashion more broadly, and how this industry is regularly the canary in the coal mine for supply chain AI, automation, and delivery technology. So before we get into that huge, big, impossible picture, Chris, what on earth is going on in this case?
It's like the Spider-Man meme, I think, where you should actually just be pointing at each other, to be honest. There are, I think it's worth pointing out, obviously this is a case that is ongoing and is going to continue, we think, for a little while. There will be some of our listeners who are hearing that and going, well, isn't it a bit rich for Shein to be saying these sorts of things, because there are allegations and evidences in the past that they have, not directly because they rely on various different providers and producers of these sorts of things, but people who have used Shein as a platform for selling their wares in China, where copyright and intellectual property laws are much less stringent, have been found to have used designs from independent artists before, and actually, to their credit, the platform has then started to take action, taken them down, and things like that. But I think there will be people here who are having a wry laugh at the idea that actually Shein is saying to Temu, "Well, you cannot copy us." It's a bit like that distillation argument that we've heard about in the AI world, where there's been this claim from US labs saying that you cannot, as a Chinese lab, come in and steal and distill our models, ask them questions and get the answers out in order to reverse engineer how they work. Then Elon Musk comes along at his trial recently and says, well, XAI has been doing that to other model outlets as well. So yeah, a bit of hypocrisy here, but I think that it is fascinating that they're using the UK courts as a place to try and have these debates. And I think that kind of speaks to the stakes involved, and also the role that the UK has as a potential marketplace for both of them.
So I spent and/or wasted a lot of time this morning trying to go through as many Shein and Temu cases. They both face countless accusations of taking from other retailers, using AI to change the images, IP theft, and as the Shade Room covered earlier this year, so Shein is facing allegations about AI copying designs, images, and likenesses specifically from black businesses. And it's a very, very shiny glass house and it's a very heavy stone. But Temu stands from a similar number of infractions, and I've got a long list in front of me. But so have H&M, so have Zara, so have a lot of the other fashion retailers. And getting really into any of the specifics will probably get us sued, or at least make sure that I lose the will to ever do journalism ever again from the amount of right to replies that we would have to offer. But given that tech has made heavy inspiration from the catwalks possible within minutes rather than months, what is this? Surely is going to continue, right? It's going to get bigger and more bold, and the recourse is going to get less and less and less. Or am I just being too pessimistic?
No, I think that this is the new approach. I think that it's fueled by consumer demand, right? There is this. You can look on Reddit forums. You can look, frankly, just on your local high street. You can look at the conversations that you have with your friends and your family. People love dupes. It's that kind of the global supply chain and the just massive tech wave that we've seen that allows e-commerce to flourish in a way that it didn't until just a few years ago, means that the person who previously might have gone to Morocco or to Rome or whoever and got like a hooky Louis Vuitton bag or whatever from a street seller there is now the norm everywhere else. And not to say that these platforms are doing that, but there is that is now a normalized view amongst the consumers. And so that is being reflected, I think, in these platforms where we don't necessarily stand up and go, "Oh, I don't think that's actually okay." Like, it feels morally wrong to have a slightly cheaper version of something that is a look-alike or a smell-alike or a sound-alike of these sorts of things. And that's a change in consumer habit, which enables this fast fashion industry to become the norm. Derek Guy is always a really interesting Twitter follow. He's the guy who's like a pseudonymous fashion observer, quite catty in his comments often. He always makes the case that we should have these really finely made, hand-woven items of clothing that will last us generations. But the reality is that most people they don't want to do that.
Okay, so we're gonna try to get onto the three broad issues. So the level of the global tech trade and the actual human labor involved in it and the supply chains, all sorts of stuff. But specifically on IP, I'm going to I'm going to give you an example, and I'm going to see if I can sort of entirely destroy that myth.
Okay.
So, according to Vogue Business's tech editor Amy O'Brien, so high fashion is an industry built on all of the inferred meaning, emotion, and unspoken context that shapes human desire, aspiration, identity, and the promise of buying into a certain life forms the basis of luxury, taste, curation, and superior craftsmanship. And actually, so that story is that high fashion is painting the picture and fast fashion copies it. But, as the reason we're talking about this is because it's a lot more complicated. So my example is that high fashion house Maison Margiela's most recognizable shoe design is the GAT, and they were originally designed from the German Federal Defense Force in the 1970s by Adidas and others. But in the 1990s, the story goes. So again, how much of this is 100% true but the story goes that Margiela found some of those shoes in an Austrian surplus store, and he painted over the midsoles, added text them, and then added them to his runway shows. And this is luxury fashion, but it was fashion done fast. So with fast fashion leveraging AI to metaphorically paint over midsoles and add text to garments, this existential question is, what is the difference of fast fashion doing that to luxury fashion? And is it just in perception in the age of narrative is everything?
Yeah, I mean, it's that idea of we don't care anymore. There is a pride action. There used to be a pride in having the legitimate article because it came.
But that Margiela article is this sort of thing that appeared on the run walk, but it's just an Adidas shoe with some paint on it.
Yeah, but it has a high end mark to it. There is a reason why LMVH has ridiculous revenues every single year and is kind of still going strong. There's a reason why when I go down to London, there are queues out the door of some of the kind of high-end fashion names. By the way, I'm the least useful qualified person to be talking about this, as those who are watching us rather than listening to us as well will be able to attest to. But anyway, there is,
what's your fanciest fashion item that you've bought? What's the thing that you are proudest of strutting down the street in?
I think I have like an Aquas Scutum pea jacket or something like that.
Sorry, I derailed you.
You're way more fashion forward than this.
Oh, don't. Acne always, Helmut Lang before Helmut was deposed. Margiela, again, while Margiela was still involved, and Dries van Noten until recently when Dries also vanished. One of my favourite things was we were in Antwerp and there just happened to be sort of a final collection of Dries before they left as a sample sale. We spent too long in that warehouse. It was a great time. Sorry, tech. We were talking about tech.
Why are you asking me the questions then in this instance? I mean, you know more than this. The one thing I will say on the IP side of things, not on a fashion point of view, but something that is, I think, kind of emblematic of the way in which there is a very different perception of IP depending on where you are in the world. And these two companies that are currently battling this out in this court case are very much of a kind of Chinese viewpoint on the world. There is a guy who I've written multiple stories about. His name is Kerry Muzzy. He's a music composer based in the United States, I believe. He might be Canada, in which case he'll hate me for saying that he's from the US, but I think it's the US.
Just say North America, and then the catch-all of don't really know, so we're going to get away with it by using really vague terms.
There you go, North America. He's north of the Gulf of America, whatever it's now called. Gulf of Mexico.
No,
it's always Mexico.
It's still the Gulf. It's the Gulf of Mexico.
Yeah. And he's a very successful composer of music for TV and movies. And he has an interesting sideline slash bugbear slash revenue stream of copyright striking Chinese state TV because they upload movies and films that they have made and TV shows that they have broadcast, which just steal his music. And they admit to it. They say, we thought that this was free of copyright. We downloaded it from like a torrent pack somewhere. He's literally got email chains from the people within the companies saying that. And so there is this kind of approach where like they just don't have that same viewpoint as we do. And I think that's kind of like a big consequential thing when you consider that actually this is now pushing out into global trade.
So to try and answer all of the many points, I think with fast fashion, fashion is built on theft, fashion is built on inspiration, fashion is all cyclical. Of this, we are all too aware. How many different cuts of a t-shirt are there? Well, you can cut. There are all manner of bias cuts and different crops, but ultimately, a t-shirt is a t-shirt. I mean, I understand designers. It's not that, but in the broadest terms, it is difficult on the core concept of a boxy crop tee. That's a boxy crop tee. There aren't that much you can do with copyright or IP. When it comes to more intricate designs or specific brand motifs, that comes into the sort of the principle of this case. And so I forget where I read this, but it might even be from your AI opinion editor, which we should probably talk about at some point. But this machine or this article, no, hold on, I found it. It is from your AI opinion editor, terrifying future that we exist in. This says it's not just about photos, it's about who gets to shape the rules of digital commerce. And that point around actually, this is just the small creators might get a few thousand pounds for their thing, or paid enough so they go away. But ultimately, it is Shein trying to retain control of this market, which traditionally has not been very controllable. And then the smaller creators just vanish, and the IP is there just to protect big corporations rather than the small ones. Given that your AI reporter is seemingly the most accurate reporter we have, particularly amongst the three of us, well, two of us plus your reporter, is it just a case of simple big tech going after other big tech to stifle competition?
Yeah, well, I think there's sharp elbows here, right? I mean, this is a massive market. Worth pointing out that these companies have huge capitalizations. We often I think there's still this perception of both Shein and Temu as like little scrappy upstarts, whereas actually they are massive, massive companies with huge bottom lines. I mean, so Temu is owned by Pinduoduo, PDD, which is a massive Chinese tech company. Not of the scale of like a Meta, but still a significant big beast. And so they
do
you
want some fun numbers?
Yeah, go for it.
So global fast fashion is projected, it's around $179 billion now, and it's expected to grow to $389 billion by 2034. So according to a Fortune Business Insights analysis, and according to the e-commerce analytics firm ECDB, Shein accounts for around 83 billion of that, or just under half. So it is bigger than Zara, it's bigger than H&M, and it's again, it varies widely depending on which piece of the report you read. It depends on which fashion report you read, but also it's still seemingly quite small because the actual total fashion market size is 10 times larger, roughly $1.84 trillion in 2025, projected to grow to $2.5 trillion by 2033, according to Grandview Research. Again, numbers vary widely depending on which report you read. So actually, like you say, it's not Meta, but it's this huge monster of business, and if it accounts for half of fast fashion from almost literally nowhere 10 years ago, 15 years ago, that disruption is already huge and stands to get even bigger.
Yeah, and so Pinduoduo is making 65 billion, which is huge, right? These are not small upstarts. They are litigating to try and gain a foothold. Ironically, in the same way that Elon Musk and Sam Altman are currently in the US, to try and dislodge a competitor, to have some sort of scuppering of their ability to advance in this space and to get one up so that they can gain market share on what they see is going to be a massive growth area in the future. And so to me, what's really interesting, and I years ago maybe used to write stories for a business magazine that I think no longer really exists, called Courier. very small, very scrappy. And they would talk about the tech adoption of these larger fashion houses as kind of like looking at the innovation arms of these businesses. It feels like if you don't have a big investment from like the likes of H&M, from Zara, from whoever, the kind of established names in mainstream fashion to all this sort of stuff, then you're going to have your lunch completely eaten by these much more nimble, frankly, often much less, skittish or squeamish in terms of their decision making businesses like a Shein or a Temu.
So I think we haven't got into so much of the different things. So we haven't got into the idea of AI optimized production, the actual to demand production, all of these things. So I'm sure we will come back to it. But the one thing we would be derelict in our duty if we did not mention was actually just about the human cost of this, and how that changes with automation and 3D printing and emerging technologies. So according to Earth Day, they report that ultimately it's one of the most labor intensive industries, and it employs approximately 60 million factory workers worldwide, yet fewer than 2% earn a living wage. So garment workers endure, according to Earth Day, unsafe conditions, wage theft, exhausting hours, minimal pay, and gender-based harassment. So again, this is a technology podcast, so we're not going to get into the real depth of it. But on the sort of side of that, given that tech is already automating this, given that 3D printing becomes more and more widespread, and given that humans, unless they are incredibly cheap to employ, are being removed from this process. What is the trend happening there? And does that mean that it's going to get better for workers or even worse?
No, even worse, because what happens is, I mean, and to be clear, the exploitative nature of a lot of this stuff is terrible, but they are going to be, we talk about the white collar disruption of the AI revolution and the impact that's going to have. As we start to see more embodied AI, as we start to see this quote unquote thinking being put into robots and things like that, and particularly in terms of industrial robots, and we're still a long way away from that. They can't really fold t-shirts very well, which is good for the poor person who is being exploited and given maybe 1 pence at most for each t-shirt that they fold in a factory somewhere in Bangladesh or whatever. Once they get to that point, those people are not going to have any money at all. And there's that is kind of horrific because they're going to end up having their jobs displaced, and then I don't know what replaces that. Like it's simultaneously kind of they're being attacked from both sides. So like we want to have, and we should have, and we do have campaigning to try and improve the rights of workers, the pay that they get, the reduction of exploitation in these places in the fashion supply chain. But if you are a fashion company that uses these people or a subcontractor to one of these big organizations who is being needled to try and improve pay, improve conditions, and you're seeing around the corner, maybe 18 months down the line, the idea of you're going to be able to actually just bring in robots to do this even cheaper and even faster, do you take that chance to try and invest in improving people's opportunities, or do you hold out even longer? The worry that I have is that we see stalling, we see pushing that project further and further down the line until the AI aspect comes over, and then in which place you go, well, actually, see you later, human workers. We exploited you enough. Now we don't need you at all. Pessimistic, right? I know I'm a pessimist on this sort of stuff.
And it's a case of if there is already that by a lot of campaigners, they're saying really clearly exploitative, which means that and then I speak from a place of complete naivety around this. The displacement of those roles should, if it removes the exploitation, but then does it remove any way of making money, and does it remove any way of sort of building a life? Such a blurry way of talking around. If
Humans,
they're already being,
right?
if people are already being exploited, doesn't stopping that exploitation. Can that ever be that surely has to be a good thing? But then if they're without any income, that is a bad thing. Chris, in 30 seconds or less, can you solve the conundrum around worker exploitation, particularly in South Asia and Central Africa? Easy.
I absolutely cannot. And I think the main issue that I have is we talk a lot about the impact that AI is going to have on all of our lives, and I don't doubt that that is an issue. but I think that we don't think about the impact that's going to have on other people's lives, because like AI is a really powerful tool that can be put to quite nefarious means if you want. My worry is that it's going to be put to nefarious means by people who already exploiting humans to the extent that humans are not exploited, they're just cast aside. And I don't know what happens to them. And that's a big question that is perhaps an entirely other episode that we should look at.
Well, luckily in this segue, we are going to talk about at least some of that and the attempt at a bit of exploitation in part 2. We'll be back in 1 second. Welcome back to part 2 of Crashed. There are finally things in law in the UK for the oversight of AI. Sort of. So the government has told the UK's data regulator, the ICO, to write official guidance on how organisations should use AI when personal data is involved. So that guidance will cover 2 big things. So using AI to make or support decisions about people, so jobs, benefits, loans, housing, etc., 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 and building or training AI systems using people's data. So where children's data is involved, when any data involved is in line with sort of GDPR. But in simpler terms, the UK is forcing the ICO to write the rule book for how AI can use people's personal data, especially when it affects real decisions about their lives. So it's not really a law, except it's a law to make sure there is a law, that there is no hard date coded into this of when it has to be a law, and I'm incredibly confused. Chris, are you less confused than I am?
Nope. Not at all. I mean, I'm glad that the ICO is doing this. This is useful. It's typically ICO-ish in that it's vague. It's kind of, we will do something in the future and so on and so forth. It feels like it's mirroring a lot of what's happening in the EU around the need for kind of explainability in AI. I think there's a growing reckoning that this is going to be part of our lives and stick around for a lot longer and with a lot more depth into what we do than perhaps people might have first thought, particularly people who were skeptical about this.
Who didn't think this was going to be huge? Surely everyone was like, this is generational changing.
No, there are still people who hew to the line that this is a stochastic parrot, that this is kind of a flash from the pan. I think those people are increasingly looking a bit out of touch now.
The internet will never catch on. I'm going to keep sending letters. I'll never even bother to send an email. Why would I? It's just a passing fad. Surely people have learnt by now.
Well, I think so. It felt like there were 2 schools of thought 3 years ago, really, because ChatGPT didn't come out until 3.5 years ago. You had the people who were drinking the Kool-Aid of the tech company saying this is going to be transformative. Like you're going to be out of a job within 10 months. Prepare now for universal basic income. Governments need to take action. All of this is terrible. Rise of the robots. Then you had the people who said, no, this is ridiculous. This is maths, just doing maths. It's a parlor game and it will never catch on. What you have now, I think, is the people who are drinking the Kool-Aid are still drinking the Kool-Aid. They are still overhyping it to a certain extent. You have, of that other group, there's been a split. So there are those who say, yeah, okay, well, AI is better than we first thought, and it is advancing, but still, like, it's not all that. But we can see that it is advancing, and so, our kind of view on this has changed a little bit. There are some people, I think, who still, and they're a very small, hardcore group of people, who are like, this is all completely a bubble. This is all just, like, never going to come out. There's mania going on at the minute around this sort of stuff. And when you all come to your senses, I'll be here to kind of talk you through it and explain why you were wrong and you were stupid. And I won't judge you, but I will be disappointed in you. And yeah, those people I think are now at the point of delusion themselves on this sort of thing. So like, it's good that we're seeing this guidance. It's typically ICO-ish in that it's like, it's there for you to use if you want, but it's also not going to be something that is compulsive that you need to do, and there's no time frame on it. But we would like to have some sort of framework, and I think that's just it's a testament to the fact that we still don't know. Like the EU is still deciding this, we're still deciding this. The technology is moving so fast that's like trying to pin the tail on a donkey. It will change by the time that you publish things. Therefore, you need to be deliberately vague and try and fill in the details as and when those issues arise.
Okay, so three equally important points. Firstly, what sort of advanced pin the tail on the donkey game are you playing where the donkey is moving? That is some crazy stuff going on.
Mechanization of these sorts of things. I mean, that's a cool game. No.
Point two: have you watched the studio with Seth Rogen in it yet?
No.
Speaking of they try and relaunch Kool-Aid. They believe that drinking the Kool-Aid has got such a bad brand positioning that they really want to relaunch it, and they try to do a sort of superhero movie about Kool-Aid Man without giving too many spoilers. Well worth watching. It's very funny. It's Seth Rogen being at his most Seth Rogen-y. Point point three. I think the government saying that something should be done at some point soon is absolute. We talked to the top. Albeit that since we've been recording now, West Streeting has just resigned from government. So
well, not quite. He hasn't actually resigned. He's apparently the Times is reporting that he is threatening to resign by the time that you listen to this. So let's be predicting the future and say by the time that you listen to this, West Streeting either has or is about to put in his resignation. He doesn't want to spoil the King's speech.
Westminster insiders are often mention Streeting in the same phrase as a sort of bottling it. So Streeting has had a couple of opportunities said by insiders to make this challenge, not just in the recent days, but across recent months and certain sort of pivotal moments. So he is developing his reputation. People say very careful political language around bottling and not being able to make that big step and really take that push because of the stakes involved. Where were we before
the
that?
ICO.
So it's all about rhetoric, and it's about the government needs to be seen to do something. This has been a hard fought piece of legislation to even get through this far, and then there's going to be some more consultancy. There's going to be some more political chat. There's going to be a lot of sort of interviewing experts. There's going to be another report, another piece of paper. Eventually, something will get done, but by that point, the things that they've been interviewed about will already have moved on. The technology that they're trying to regulate against will have already become more advanced in being able to bypass these rules. And it is further proof of the government only acting after the horse is well and truly bolted. And I don't know what the solution is, except for rebuilding Parliament in a way that means it can legislate quickly or build out quick, tight regulations on specific things rather than some of the sort of the way that Parliament particularly has worked around it. So take drug legislation is a really interesting one, where the UK is one of the few who've just blanket banned anything that could be even construed as nearly something that might be illegal one day in a way that prevents them from having to make that tiny nitty-gritty pieces of legislation one-on-one because they're aware that it would react too slow. So I don't know where this goes except for into the very, very, very long grass.
Yeah, but at a more like broad and simple point, going back to first principles, I'm intrigued as to whether or not we want government to work any quicker. Like, I mean, this like the UK is not an outlier in this. In fact, actually, they're comparatively quick. If you, again, we're tending towards stereotype here, but like Europe is renowned for being very bureaucratic. The United States bogs things down in just constant infighting to the extent that basically their legislature is paralyzed all the time. The fact that we've got here at all is still interesting, but it gets to the point of like, what is the purpose of a scrutinizing parliamentary body? Is it to kind of pass things quickly and to try and tackle issues as and when they arise with alacrity, or is it to try and take a step back, think about what the issues are, really thoroughly interrogate them, and tackle the problems? And I don't know where I sit on that, because to be honest, like I want to have it both ways. I want speed and I want depth, and I don't think that they're able to provide that. And I don't know whether or not the solution is trying to rewrite or not blow up Parliament. Blow up Parliament will get me someone knocking at the door. But like redoing Parliament sounds just like Guy Fawkes there for a little bit, far too early in the year. Changing how Parliament works in a way that is meaningful while still maintaining that sort of integrity and depth of analysis.
Speaking of cumbersome legislative bodies, beautiful segue. The earth-shattering AI Act from the EU was going to really set the standard for how the entire world would avoid slipping into the doomsday apocalypse of Bond villains and late-stage capitalism and all of the fierce mongering stories that you have heard about what AI is about to do. So in a similar way to the UK, not the same, but a watered-down version has been passed by officials, but the new version delays its implementation. It will exclude machinery using AI from the rules, and it still needs formal approval from the EU government and European Parliament, but it includes banning AI practices that create unauthorized sexually explicit images, so-called nudifier apps, and a few other bits of legislation, but lawmakers have called it a necessary simplification to limit bureaucracy. But Chris, reading you this week, I think you would call it something slightly different.
Big win for Germany, and another blow to the idea of a unified Europe that agrees on things and debates things. So the carve out for industrial exemptions was largely pushed by Germany. Friedrich Merz is. It's fair to say he's not very strong in his position at the minute internally.
Explain who Friedrich Merz is.
Yeah, he's the Chancellor of Germany. So the Chancellor of Germany, Friedrich Merz. There you go. Done my style guide. Best one of those is The Economist says that you have to write like an alien's just landed on planet Earth. So you have to be like the BBC, the UK's state broadcasting arm, and things like that, which you assume that most people know because the BBC's reach is massive. But let's account for that alien who has never heard of this. Friedrich Merz, our listeners are well-read, well-travelled people. So I have confidence, Alex, that they will know who Friedrich Merz is.
I don't. Well, of course, our listeners are wonderful, brilliant, incredibly intelligent people, but also I don't think Merz has set his global stage out in a way that Merkel did, in the way that Scholz tried to and didn't really. But it's almost remained, particularly given that the Brexit deal is concluded and the UK is a little bit adjunct from it. There hasn't really been that same integration or UK awareness of his policy aspirations.
I suppose that's true, and also he just looks like the world's most boring man, and I think by all accounts is just
compared to Scholz. That's a high bar.
Quite.
More importantly, did you ever play the sort of 1980s board game Take the Brain?
No, Take the Brain. What is
the Brain.
This?
It was like a sort of childlike version of chess. But Merz, it turns out it's from 1970, but I got this thing from a charity shop as a kid, and Merz looks so much like the brain of a really deep cut, or a numbskull of Take the Brain. It's an incredible. So if you have
he has got a large head. That is true. He does have a very large head. Although I have a very large head as well. I had to when I no longer play cricket, Alex. I know that you bloody love cricket. When I was in primary school and aged 11, I had to get a men's large cricket helmet in order to fit on my head, which is why I believe I no longer like cricket, because this thing was so incredibly heavy. Imagine my 11-year-old neck trying to hold up a cricket helmet.
Tech angle on that is actually that the new titanium helmets are basically weightless, although incredibly expensive. But we should final point on the EU. We're gonna get back to we're gonna get back to the EU.
Detouring us, we're not doing it.
We are already fully detailed. We're talking about 1980s board games and the way of cricket helmets. We are already well and truly off track. So it is given the delay. Is it going to come? Is it going to definitely happen, or is the EU still going to think again? If it still has to go through both EU governments and European Parliament, is that just a formality, or is actually there going to be some pushback and it actually risks just never reaching full legislation?
No, I think that this one is going ahead. In part, I think the debate, the discussion, the attempt to try and like push it back was this time. And actually this went, to stereotype that every European parliamentary or European Council discussion goes down to the wire, late night, etc., etc. This one, I think, literally did go like as far as pretty much anyone has done. And I think that's because that is the perception is this is it. You decide this now, we move on this as a group. And so I think that fight has kind of been won or lost depending on what side you're on. It just sets a really icky is the wrong word, but like it's a discomforting precedent, I think, for me at least, and one that I think could come back to bite Europe in the years to come. He's trying to, I think, head off criticism from Germany's very strong industrial economy. It's a place that still builds things. And so the idea that they were going to have to follow very stringent rules around the AI Act, carefully monitoring how it is used and things like that, was seen as a massive blocker to growth. And so basically he got obstinate. he said, no, we're not gonna allow this to happen. You have to have this carve out for industry use of AI. If you don't, then the whole thing won't happen. And got his way, which I think is quite surprising. Testament perhaps to the way in which Germany has an outsized role in the European Union. But also, I think, is dangerous because it kind of means that the principles that have governed EU tech regulation for the best part of now a decade, since the GDPR was starting to be debated and then passed into law and then actually coming into force in 2018 and onwards, is now up for debate. I think that is a big, big flashing warning sign for the years to come on tech regulation in the EU.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. There is no way for the European Union as a whole, particularly with all of the vetoes and all of the carve-outs and all of the things as you describe, to agree on something that will directly impact the GDP in the short term, long term. Again, it's a lot more complicated than just this sort of short-termist. GDP grows with AI companies in tow. There's a huge potential. No country is going to say, no, we want to really stifle AI regulation. And on that incredibly optimistic, positive note, we'll be back for the final part of Crash, where we start asking each other questions which we've had no idea about, which, to be honest, is most of this podcast so far. We'll be back in 1 second. Welcome back to the final part of Crash, where we ask questions to which there are no answer, which, to be honest, has, like we talked about just before the break, it's been most of the show. We have been on very, very, very shaky ground at some points during today's episode. But only if you've listened this far do you realise that we're admitting that, because we are experts in everything we talk about, obviously. So, do you want to go first or shall I?
I'll go first. Sweet or salty popcorn? Which one do you think Wes Streeting likes more?
I mean, that's you're just setting myself up for just how salty is Wes Streeting. That's the,
yeah, I'm giving you all of the options here. I can give you an alternate one as well if you want.
Oh no! The actual answer to that is he likes both sweet and salty. He doesn't want to be drawn into a binary debate on a complex issue, and really wants to make sure the centre ground and the public is really behind this complex issue, and he really wants to work towards a collaborative future.
Okay. Link to that one then. Where is the line of acceptable food in a cinema that you were talking about at the start? Because you said you think pizza's good, but nachos aren't.
That's a really simple answer. Anything that makes a noise that a nacho would make when you're crunching into it, not acceptable in a cinema. Anything it can't be a pizza that means you create a crispy noise. You can't eat crisp in the cinema. Minstrels, turns out, I've been told. That's a grey area because minstrels and popcorn obviously go together.
What?
But have you never poured minstrels into a popcorn box of popcorn?
Well, there's the intro, the little pre-sting for you. But
no,
I haven't. No,
you have never lived.
Okay.
How? Next time you're in the cinema with
my
Wes
issue
Streeting.
with nachos is not actually the sound. Nachos fucking stink. They fucking stink the cinema out. Cinema nachos are awful.
Are we talking about the standard cinema, or are we talking about like mid-tier gentrified Odeon?
Alex, I live in Newcastle. I don't have your fancy Dan gentrified London cinemas.
Or are we talking about serious bespoke go to premieres screening things in Soho with like beautiful wine brought to you? And
no, we're talking about the view in Gateshead. We're not talking about your. I mean, like we have an Everyman in Newcastle, which is the fanciest. No, that's not true. We have a Tyneside cinema, a very strong independent cinema scene in Newcastle, but it's the fanciest that you can get is the Everyman or the Tyneside cinema in Newcastle. The Everyman, I think, does like proper food that they bring to your seat, but we're talking about like View $7.99 nachos, which are like the worst thing. That they're like a stink bomb, an atom bomb, everything combined.
So the three tiers of London cinema is: one is standard run of the mill. Second is like Odeon Lux, where they will bring you pizza if you order it. The third one is like private cinema that does just, you can have a sit down meal while you're watching a cinema. And of course, then the upper secret tier of like secret cinema and others, which got controversial views on. But that's a whole different experiential piece of work. I think if it disrupts other people, no. Unless it disrupts other people, fine. Do what you want.
So do
surely.
minstrels disrupt people because they're sugar coated, or do they melt into the popcorn? Is that why you're
They
saying
melt
this is
into the
Nirvana?
popcorn, and you have to suck them. You can't bite them because they're too loud. Try it. Try it. Your life will be changed. To move us back to technology rather than just West
No,
Streeting
it's a tech
and
podcast
allegories.
about everything else, and minstrels and nachos at cinemas
Can you
are
explain
everything else.
any technology innovation in the popcorn space in the last 10 years?
Yes, that TikTok video of the popcorn person in the United States who managed to butter every popcorn with layers. Have you seen this one? You will have seen it because everybody has seen it. He does a very performative dance. He's like very exuberant in his tossing of the popcorn. He does a kind of like disco style circular movement to ensure proper butter distribution, and then also layers the popcorn in on and off. So he's an absolute queen, this guy.
Now, as we're recording, Streeting and multiple sources has now launched a leadership bid on Thursday morning. Anyway, I'm going to bring us back to technology. If the UK is relying on the ICO's AI code to make existing data protection law do the work of AI regulation, what happens in the gap before the code exists, especially for systems already being deployed in welfare, work, credit, housing, and policing?
Okay.
Speaking, moving on
As a
from
sidebar
popcorn.
to give me time to think about that, because it was such a long question. I was watching Sky News on Tuesday evening, and Sam Coates, he was asking a question of an MP on Mark Austin's show. And Mark Austin allowed him to do this and then through to the top of the hour. And before he did that, he said, by the way, Sam, I think that was the longest question that's ever been asked on TV history, because he went down all sorts of diversions and stuff like that. So the question that you're asking me is what happens in the interregnum between the ICO saying this is going to happen and then the ICO actually doing it?
That is a more succinct version of it, yeah.
Yeah, good. Good. I feel like Mark Austin and you are Sam Coates there. I get the impression that they don't really like each other, but I don't know. It seemed very either they're best friends or they really hate each other. I couldn't quite tell from the tone of what they were saying. So, to answer your question,
I can answer that off. I can answer that after we stop.
Okay,
After we
good.
press the
That'd be
off
great.
button.
Because I really actually I think that there might be something there that is just quite like he fucking hates him in a way that I didn't imagine. What the hell was the question? Okay.
How much shit is the government going to try push through before the ICO tells them not to?
Well, okay, I actually think not a lot. And this is genuinely a question to which there is no answer. Because I think probably not a lot, but I don't know. And it really depends on what happens with Wes Streeting this morning as you're listening to this. Because either this is a deeply political question, actually, in a way that I hadn't imagined it would be. Because either you have a government that continues to be paralysed and doesn't pass anything because it's just not doing anything, which is one of the key criticisms that Jess Phillips had when she sent in her letter of resignation on Tuesday evening. Or you end up with a new prime minister, in which case there is probably a dynamism there. Though, I'll be honest, I don't really know what Wes Streeting's kind of approach to tech is, what his view on tech is. I don't know who you would even have as tech secretary, which is probably the key part of this. I mean, you can read the runes of the Labour Party more than I can. Is Liz Kendall a Wes Streeting gal?
I am going to avoid commenting on all of this stuff while it's still up in the air. I don't know. Is the beautiful on the record answer?
Nobody knows. Even Wes Streeting probably doesn't know at this point. Certainly Keir Starmer doesn't know. But anyway, if it was a canny government, then they would try and push through a lot of this sort of stuff that they want to. The reality is, I don't think that we have a canny government at the minute. And I think that's partly the problem. So probably not much is the answer to that question. But also, I think it could be massively changing based on what the outcome of the next 24, 48 hours are from the point that you're listening to this.
Then actually, we could probably, I think once this settles down a bit, we could probably do a whole episode about what the UK's tech policy and how it changes, or almost a predictions, and we could do a sort of politics episode around what happens if it does happen. As discussed, we don't know anything that will happen yet.
Love a predictions episode. It allows me to be wrong in many ways. Publicly wrong as well.
Given by the time that you're listening to this, probably the UK government has fallen, everything is doomed. So we should probably stop there to give you a chance to take breath. But thank you for listening. Crashes and Everything Popular is Wrong Production. Follow us on all your favourite podcast platforms. Title music from Nuffer. Check them out on all the streamers. They are fabulous. We're hosted by Acast, assisted by Roadside Studios, published every Thursday morning. Get in touch at Alex Hudson on socials or alex@crash.org.uk by email. Follow Chris on X @Stokel or Chris at crash.org.uk. If you want to support the podcast, go to crash.substack.com or search for Crash Podcast wherever the hell you want, and we'll be back next week.
Very good. So, Mark Hosson,